The Adventures of Paddington and the Painting. Dear Aunt Lucy, today is the art show. We are going to see Mrs. Brown's painting. Paddington was enjoying his breakfast. Just then, Mrs. Brown came in. I can't be in the art show. It's tonight. I don't know what to paint. Paddington wanted to help Mrs. Brown. Don't give up, said Paddington. Paddington looked at Mrs. Brown's painting. I like this horse, he said. That's a fish, said Mrs. Brown. These are no good for the art show. Let's start over, said Paddington. He picked up a brush. He painted one dot. Now is your turn, he said. Mrs. Brown looked at the dot. She still didn't know what to paint. Let's try something else, said Paddington. He covered his eyes. Then he covered Mrs. Brown's eyes too. They tossed paint here. They tossed paint there. There was paint on the walls. There was paint on the floor, but there was no paint on the painting. So there was still no painting for the art show. I need to think, said Mrs. Brown. She did some yoga. She thought and thought. Paddington did yoga too. He thought and thought. He fell asleep. Oh no, said Mrs. Brown. I don't know what to do. She looked sad. So Paddington and Mrs. Brown walked in the garden. You can paint a tree or a flower, said Paddington. I have to paint something amazing, said Mrs. Brown. Look at what Mr. Curry is making, Mrs. Brown, said Paddington. That is amazing, said Mrs. Brown, but not for my painting. Maybe a snack will help us think, said Paddington. I love spaghetti. Paddington ate and ate. The spaghetti was very long. So do you see that the story is that they keep trying to come up with ideas of what to paint. Now I know what to paint, said Mrs. Brown with a smile. I will paint you, Paddington. You are an amazing bear. Paddington posed for Mrs. Brown. She painted and painted. Pose, so it means that he's standing still so she can paint him. Soon the painting was ready for the art show. And it even won a prize. It says first place. So together, the two of them thought of a painting. Dear Aunt Lucy, today I learned to paint. It's fun to use a brush or even a paw. He uses paw. Love from Paddington. The end.